Knight ducked just in time as an arrow sailed past.
Easy, easy!
His horse began crow-hopping, forcing him to fight to keep his seat. If he got thrown, the horse would race off and leave him stranded, and at the mercy of the Indian he had already wounded. By the time Knight got his horse under control, the cowboy had flashed past, waving his empty pistol over his head. Knight brought up his rifle, but couldn't fire without hitting the cowboy. The young man launched himself from his horse and crashed into the charging Apache. He brought his revolver down hard on the warrior's shoulder. The crack sounded loud enough to convince Knight that the collarbone had broken under the blow. Cowboy and Indian thrashed on the ground. Knight had trouble maneuvering his horse around to get a clear shot as the two men wrestled desperately with each other. In spite of the broken bone and what had to be intense pain, the Apache fought like 10 men. He kicked out and forced the cowboy away. The Apache brandished a silver-bladed knife that flashed in the sunlight. His grip weak in his right hand, the Apache dropped the knife and picked it up with his left, just as the cowboy surged forward, swinging his gun at the warrior's head. He missed and lost his balance. As the Indian twisted out of the way, the cowboy was sprawled face down to the ground. The Apache reared above him, the knife clumsy in his hand but still potentially lethal. In spite of the pain and weak grip, the man prepared to deliver a death blow. Knight's bullet reached him first. The Apache took half a step back, stunned by the impact. He tried to touch the red flower blossoming on his chest with his left hand. He toppled backwards like a felled tree, dead when he hit the ground. The cowboy got shakily to his feet, still holding his revolver. He stared at the fallen warrior and then looked up at Knight.
I got a lot to thank you for, mister. You saved my life.
You probably saved mine, too, from that one. I never heard him coming up behind me.
You winged him when he was chasing me. See?
The cowboy nudged the body with the toe of his boot, lifting slightly to show where Knight's first bullet had cut through the man's ribcage.
Went in and bored clean through, came out the back. Didn't even hardly slow this bastard none.
Knight slid his rifle back into the scabbard and then swung down from the saddle.
How'd you get them on your trail?
He cared less about the cowboy's story than getting on his way, but he felt he owed the young man something for coming to his aid the way he had. Hearing his story would take care of that obligation. The cowboy was barely 20, if that. He had a short, dark stubble on his lean jaw that might have taken a week or two for him to grow. He wore a green vest with 2 buttons popped off, a shirt that had been white at one time, and blue denim pants worn white in patches. A gun belt was strapped around his hips, but Knight doubted the boy was a gunslinger. He held his weapon with authority, but not the arrogance of a killer. Though Knight couldn't be sure, he thought the cowboy's hand shook just a mite. He was sure of that tremor when the cowboy pulled his battered hat up from behind where it hung by a chin strap around his neck. Likely, the youngster was no more than a down-on-his-luck wrangler caught on the range by a pair of Apaches who mistook him for easy prey. The cowboy reloaded as he spoke.
Just more bad luck. I lost a spare horse and gear coming up from Big Bend, following the river. Down south there's plenty of water, not so much up here. The journey of death, they call this stretch, all the way up to Socorro, maybe Albuquerque. El Hornado del Muerto.